Well, this last video for this test is going to be on sleep disorders. We've talked about eating disorders. Now we're going to talk about sleep disorders. Now, once again, the problem with a sleep disorder is that if we're not getting enough sleep, then it affects us physically, in terms of psychologically, our brain capacity to think, and then biologically and physiologically, our body to get the sleep that it needs to repair cells and rest the heart and that type thing. So sleep disorders are kind of a big deal. There's two different types of sleep disorders. There's dysomnias, D-Y-S-S-O-M-N-I-A-S, dysomnias, and then there's parasomnias, all right? So let's do dysomnias first, D-Y-S-S-O-M-N-I-A-S, dysomnias. Well, the first one we have, a lot of people have heard of, it's called insomnia. And insomnia is difficulty in initiating sleep or staying asleep. So insomnia means, when we say we can't sleep, insomnia means we have trouble going to sleep or we can't stay asleep. So that's one type of dysomnia. Now, the next one is Narcolepsy, okay? Narcolepsy. Okay. Now in Narcolepsy, narcolepsy, all right, that's where we have, that's where instead of having trouble going to sleep, we go to sleep too easy, and maybe even during the day, a person just falls asleep constantly. And it's kind of interesting because even though we're talking about abnormal psychology, and I've been mentioning it a lot in this particular test that we've been having, you may have moments of insomnia where you have trouble sleeping. You may even have moments of narcolepsy. But narcolepsy is where you just fall asleep. You find yourself relaxing and you just fall asleep. But in order for it to be an abnormal psychological disorder, it has to happen for 30 consecutive days. So you can see that would really be a problem. But so we have insomnia, difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep, narcolepsy, where we fall asleep in unwanted times, okay? And then the other one we have, is hypersomnia, Hypersomnia, hypersomnia. And that is abnormal excessive sleep. Hyper means more than, extended on. So hypersomnia means that we sleep too much. There's a lot of study on how much sleep we actually need. The old 8 hours sleep, the old adage that we need 8 hours sleep, it's actually holding pretty true. 8 hours sleep is pretty good. The problem is that when we begin to get 5 hours sleep and 4 hours sleep, and it becomes cumulative, then our body doesn't have the opportunity to. There's several things that happen during sleep. We have to repair cells. We have to rebuild cells. We have to rest our heart. But the other thing that we do is we have to process toxins in our body, and a lot of those things happen during waking times, but there's also a process of removing toxins from the mind that we do a little bit at night. The other thing that we do at night is we store, okay, we take short-term memory and sort it out into long-term memory of what we're gonna need in our brain for long-term memory. We do that at night too. So sleep is a really important thing. So dysomnia, okay, so what a dysomnia is an interruption. It's the timing, the amount, or the quality of sleep. That's what dysomnia means. The timing, the amount, or the quality of sleep. So there's three types of dysomnias. Insomnia, where we have difficulty falling asleep, difficulty staying asleep. Narcolepsy, where we fall asleep at unwanted times. We have trouble staying awake, we fall asleep. And then hypersomnia, where we sleep too much. And then we have the other type, okay, besides dysomnias, we have parasomnias. Parasomnias, parasomnias. Now, a parasomnia is something a little bit different. A parasomnia is something that causes us, it causes us to affect the quality of sleep, okay? Which means that while we're sleeping, we're not really getting true sleep, okay? So whereas insomnia affected going to sleep, this is we're actually going to go to sleep, but then we're going to have problems once we're asleep. So parasomnias, there's three issues with that. The first one is nightmares. And the problem is when we have nightmares, it's kind of like these virtual reality goggles our brain sometimes can't tell the difference. So our body, we may be having this nightmare of something that's happening to us, or we're living out a situation, but our body doesn't know the difference. So whereas our heart would ordinarily be resting, it's racing. We're going through all the different, even though we're not moving even though we're not moving and we're laying there asleep, a nightmare causes our brain to work constantly, causes our body to also go into this fight or flight, and sometimes you can wake up, from a nightmare and just really go, oh my gosh, where am I at, and what's just happened? So a nightmare is a frightening REM dream, and it's enough to interrupt good sleep patterns. The second one that we have is not very common, but it's called sleep terrors. Sleep and then terrors, T-E-R-R-O-R-S. Now, in this is where let me just read this right out of the book. It's not very common. The sleeping child screams, cries, sweats, sometimes walks, has rapid heartbeat, and cannot easily be awakened or comforted. It's usually tied to a genetic link. A sleep terror is usually generated to parts of the brain that generate sleep, and then that part of the brain is also has associations with something that could be a bad experience for the child. So sleep terrors usually happen in kids under 15. Usually you outgrow that, okay? But a sleep terror is a real problem, because then not only, in a nightmare, you can wake the person up. You can say, hey, wake up, and when they wake up, the dream's over. But in a sleep terror, the person's really hard to wake up in this dream. Wouldn't that be I was going to say, wouldn't that be your worst nightmare? Okay, but no, it's not a nightmare. It's a sleep terror, okay? So that would be a pretty awful thing, but in a sleep terror, it's where the child is having this, really bad mental experience when they're sleeping, and in this case, and they're not easily awakened. So that's what a sleep terror is. So that would be pretty awful. And then the last one you probably heard a little bit about is sleepwalking. And once again, so this is parasomnia, so it's a problem with sleep. But in sleepwalking, let me read what your book says about that. Occurs at least once during non-REM, sleep in 15 to 30% of children under the age of 15. Okay, so it occurs at least once in REM sleep, which is a deep sleep, in 15 to 30% of children under age 15. So I don't think that's, 15 to 30% isn't a lot of people. 100 people, that means 70 people never sleepwalk, or maybe even 85. But in this case, it says causes may include. Causes may include maybe on some type of medication, or you may have severe stress, or you may your stress may be involved with something you can do nothing about, like sleepwalking. We've traced that to a couple different things. If you have stress and you can't do anything about it, then you're tempted to get up out of bed and go and do something, so your body feels like you're at least combating whatever the problem is. I had when I was growing up, I had my brother. Probably was about, he's a year younger than I am. I was probably, I don't know, maybe I was about 15, 14 years old, so he was 12 or 13 or whatever. But one night my dad and I were watching a basketball game. Back then they didn't really have cable, okay? But you could get this channel in from Los Angeles, so you could watch these pro basketball games, but they didn't come on till like 1 or 2 in the morning. So our den that we were in had these sliding wooden doors. They're called pocket doors now, but they have a sliding wooden door. And all of a sudden we heard a kaboom, kaboom, kaboom. And I opened the door, and my brother walked in, and he had just walked up to the door, and he was sleepwalking, and he had walked up and hit the door and bounced off, and hit the door and bounced off. And so we opened the door, and he came walking through, and as he walked right straight through the room, of course I asked my dad maybe if we could leave the door closed so he could bounce off a few more times, but we opened the door. He walked directly into the kitchen, and we both, of course, got up and watched him. We didn't wake him up. That's kind of cruel, isn't it? But we watched him, and he reached into the cabinet. He got a glass. He opened the refrigerator, poured a glass of milk, drank the glass of milk. Of course, we're just laughing. We're just thinking, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And then he walks right back to bed, and the next morning he doesn't remember a thing. So how is that a parasomnia? Okay, well, that actually disrupts sleep. That actually disrupts sleep, even though you're still asleep. Okay, even though he was still asleep, his sleep pattern was being disrupted. You know, and the funny thing about it is he never even knew he was sleepwalking. So what's a parasomnia? That's something that affects the quality of sleep that we're having. So there's 3 of those: nightmares, sleep terrors, and sleepwalking. And then there's 3 dysomnias: insomnia, narcolepsy, and hypersomnia. And those are the eating disorders. And we're going to put those together. I mean, those are the sleep disorders. Let's get this right, okay? I think I'm sleep teaching here, okay? Those were the sleep disorders. We talked about the eating disorders, and then we talked about anxiety as well. So all of that, this set of videos will all be on your test, but we're covering a lot of disorders, but we're also looking at to understand some things that we might have temporarily, even though they're not an abnormal psychological disorder. So, hey, it's getting really interesting. We'll see you next video.